Hi, this is Charlotte out here in El Sobrante, California, San Francisco Bay Area, and this week I'll be talking about the flanger and chorus effects in Studio One. All right, flanger and chorus in general, they are both delay effects, which means you have a signal, split it in two, delay one of them, modulate a little bit, add it back into the other one, and you get some kind of cool effects. However, the flanger uses a shorter delay time, less than 1 to 5 milliseconds. Chorus, longer delay times, 5 to 25 milliseconds and up. Flanger can be varied at a constant rate. Both of them, if you look at the frequency response spectrum, they're going to have the frequency notches spaced at the harmonics across that rather than evenly spaced as in a phasor. Flanger is going to give you a depth and sort of wavering, wobbly effect, while a chorus is meant to sort of reproduce the sound of like a choir and multiple voices singing, and it can also give you a wider sound. So looking at the flanger in Studio One, this is what it looks like when it comes up. There are some settings up here. Flanger effect, a lot of different presets you can use, and then the bypass is over there on the left if you want to turn it off. Starting with the LFO controls, the pitch is controlled by the LFO width, and the rate at which the width signal is added is controlled by the speed. Over here on the right, we have the feedback, which controls the amplitude of the wet signal added back in. The delay is how far that wet signal is going to lag behind the dry signal. And in Studio One, the depth over here is the wet-dry mix. So it's given as a percent wet, so the higher it is, the wetter it is. If it's at 100%, all you're going to be hearing is the wet mix. The chorus looks pretty similar. We have our settings again up here, and I just want to point something out before we get to the controls, is here in Studio One it gives this mode option of chorus or doubler. It's all a chorus effect, but they just have two different ones. When this is set on doubler, this over here will be called the spacing, and you can have up to 3 voices. If it's chorus, you get only 2 voices, and this is called the delay. Okay, just wanted to point that out. So this is, either way, it's the time between the dry and the wet signals. Again, we have the LFO controls here, the speed and the width. Now in chorus, you can control the stereo width, the range across the left and right of the stereo spectrum as well. You have some high and low pass filters here, so you can set your cutoffs. And again, here's the depth, that mix of the wet and dry signals. So for this example, I'll be playing a Native American flute here. And yes, that little flip is supposed to be there at the end, and I'll be talking about it in a moment. Okay, so for my flanger effect, I set the LFO width at 20% there, the speed 1.2, crank the feedback up to 72.5, put the delay up to 7.09, pretty high, and the depth at 73%. So let's see. Okay, so you can really hear that kind of wobbly effect, and the reason I liked these settings and kind of came up with this was because for me it sort of sounded like if you go to a powwow and you hear the guys sitting around the drum and singing while the dancers are dancing, it really took on kind of the tone of the singing, and I thought that was pretty neat to have a flanger effect on the flute and get the tone of the voices as if they were singing. Okay, so for the chorus example here, I put the spacing up to 63.37, the LFO speed 0.54, the width 33. And the stereo width here is mono because we recorded in mono. Set my cutoff frequencies at 57.1 Hertz and 10.59 kilohertz. And cranked up the depth here to 85%. So let's see what happened. There you go. And one thing that came into play here that I wanted to just talk about briefly was for the spacing, that little at the end, if this got put too high, I ended up with kind of a double at the end, which I didn't want. So I had to make sure that this was high enough to get the effect, but low enough that it didn't separate the sounds too much. So to wrap up, flanger and chorus, just to kind of describe the effects in words. A flanger is going to be wobbly, swirly. With guitars, you get that jet plane effect. Chorus is going to be wavering, shimmery, the effect of multiple voices. It's going to give you this sense of space and dimension, like playing the flute in the canyon or something. And then for your listening pleasure or inspiration, I've included some examples here. This website, sourceaudio.net, had 2 really good lists of flanger and chorus effects, mainly for guitar and a couple bass, but pretty cool to listen to. So thanks for listening to my presentation, and have a good one.